Welcome to another episode of the Being and Doing podcast, where I try to bring you stories of people and beautiful minds around us that inspire me and hopefully will inspire something new in your world. Today, I am joined by Hannah Khalil, one of the writers of my favorite play in London. And I'm really happy that this is happening now because I was just reading my notes and I was thinking, what is the story of the storyteller? And so I'm very curious to hear it. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I always ask this question in the beginning is, what are some words that you identify with? How would you, what are some aspects of your identity?
My identity.
Or identities.
I guess at the moment, the biggest one is probably mother, because I'm a mother and I have an amazing 11-year-old daughter. But also, I hope a friend, because that feels like a very important thing to be. And kindness. I'm all about kindness. I really believe that you get what you put into the world, and if you can help other people, or if you can make the world slightly nicer, then do it. So that's sort of where I'm sitting at the moment.
What has being a mother taught you?
I was really frightened about becoming a mother because I was so passionate about, I've always been very passionate about my writing, but it's something that I've only done full time for the last 5 years. And so I always had a day job, which was part time. And I was just really scared about like having enough space and time and emotional headspace in order to be able to make the work that I wanted to make. And I was scared that I wouldn't have that kind of the ability to kind of do all the things that I wanted to do. But actually it's kind of been amazing in lots of ways, but as an artist it's really enriched me in my practice, because my daughter's taught me so much about the world, and sort of I'm looking at it all through her eyes, and I'm sort of also reliving my own life through her. You can't help but look back and reassess your own growing up. And so it's really fascinating and it's really amazing, and it's another person who I want to make proud. So yeah, it's an amazing thing, and she's an amazing person, so I'm very lucky.
And I'm also curious, you said that only the last 5 years you're a full-time writer, and I heard a little bit of that story after the show, but I would like to hear how did that come to be, and when did the writing become something that who you are now?
Yeah, sure. So when I was younger, I really wanted to be an actor, but my parents are both immigrants, and I just never thought that they would approve or allow me to be an actor. So I went to university, and then after university, I went to a 1-year postgraduate drama school course. And I found acting very, very difficult because I have such respect for actors. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to have a go at it, because I think it sort of means that the way that I think about acting and actors now comes from a place of sort of understanding what is being asked of them, which is a lot. And so even when I was working, which, I wasn't all the time by any means, I found it really difficult. I wasn't sure if the audience were receiving what I was trying to put onto the stage, and it was really frustrating. But when I was at university, I started writing plays, and I started writing a very short play. And a terrible thing happened, because this little short play won a prize. So I thought, oh, this is easy. You write a play, you win a prize. It's very nice. So I continued to write, but there were no more prizes for quite a long time. Lots of not so good plays. And eventually, towards the end of my 20s, I realised acting wasn't really sustaining or feeding me creatively, but the writing was really the thing. And so that became the kind of focus. And but as I say, I always had a day job, and I was working part-time and writing and writing the rest of the time as much as I could. And I was, my early plays were self-produced. So, I'd find a producer, or I've worked loads with my husband. He's a brilliant director called Chris White. And he and I would do lots of Arts Council funding forms or various funding forms to get plays on. And so that was sort of how it went. And I had a moment I'm now 45. So I left my day job when I was 40, but I had a moment in my late 30s where I sort of had a little conversation with myself and said, I don't think I'm going to be able to make a living from writing, but that's okay, because I'm making the work that I really like and I really believe in. And so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. But then when I was 40, a few things came together at the same time. The most significant was I got a job writing on a soap opera called Hollyoaks. And obviously telly is much better paid than theatre, but also it's very demanding. And so I was working my day job in London, but having to kind of at the drop of a hat go to Liverpool where Hollyoaks was made. And it was very difficult because my daughter was quite little then. So suddenly my life became very sort of full and stressful, and I thought I can't keep all the plates spinning. So I decided it was very scary, but I decided to leave the day job. And but it was the right time and the right decision, because then very soon after that, I found out that my play, Museum in Baghdad, was going to be on at the Royal Shakespeare Company. And so then I had a really nice kind of run of kind of work, because that was such a big play and it took a long time to organize and plan and develop and rehearse. And that was a lovely kind of, it was about a year's process. So yeah, and so that's how I came to sort of leave the day job and start writing full time. And I've touched wood, I've been very lucky. I always say I've been really lucky, and people would say to me, no, you don't, it's not luck, you've worked very hard, nearly 20 years. But it feels like, it's interesting. There was a guy at my drama school who always used to say, how do you get a break? You have to apply pressure. And so he always sort of would sort of mime holding a stick and pushing hard at both ends. And it takes a lot of pressure before you get a break. So it's a bit of that, I think. And, lots of years of not just writing plays, but watching plays, going to the theatre. Like, I am obsessed with theatre. So going to the theatre loads. And I was very lucky when I was in my 20s, because there were loads of amazing schemes for people who are under 30. So I was on the Royal Court Young Writers Programme. And you, as a member of that, you could see every single play at the Royal Court for £1. So I saw everything. And likewise, they had a scheme at the National Theatre, which was called Playmates. And you could see everything for £5. So I saw so much theatre and read loads of plays and sort of spent my time sort of just immersed in theatre. And at the end of it, sort of had a sense of what I liked and what I didn't like and what I might like to do. And I think that really helped.
And as you're speaking, basically, I'm noticing an incredible life energy.
I don't feel like I've got a great life energy this morning.
Yeah, but but it is quite impressive just to listen to you and to notice your passion, your drive in a way, and I think that will for life has been part of the Hakawatis. I think that's why it resonated so much with me. There were so many difficult moments in the show, and yet their wish to continue after a difficult fight or after the big scare, or it's continuing. They're finding their way, they're telling their stories, and it sounds like you've done the same.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just wanting to yeah, just being belligerent and keeping going. And but I also think, you know, it's interesting. I think there's something about my Palestinian heritage as well, you know, and what the experience of being a Palestinian is. Obviously, I'm in the diaspora, but you know, the really tricky situation and the what it takes, the will to keep going.
Yeah.
When things are very dark and difficult. And I think Palestinians have that in spades. They have to, you know. And you know, the wonderful and deadly thing that is hope, you know, to keep going and to keep keep on in the face of even very difficult circumstances.
This is interesting. One of our psychotherapy tutors has asked us, how do you keep hope in hopeless places? And I think this is really the whole show, and I guess a lot of your life has been exactly that. Mm-hmm. Finding a way to keep the hope. And I would like to hear more about your immigrant history and heritage, because that was, I think, also a part that really resonated with me as you were speaking there, and as I was watching the show. I think I'm from Serbia, but I think we have a lot of influence of the East, and as I was watching, I could see and sense all the subtleties of the woman in the show. So I'm curious, how has this heritage shaped you, and how did you unlayer those layers that didn't serve you anymore?
I think it was more about relayering, because so I came to this country when I was a teenager, and having lived in the Middle East with my family, and it was a real culture shock coming here. I found it very, very different and difficult and strange. And so I have the privilege of white skin. So, you know, most people wouldn't know that obviously my name, but other than my name, they wouldn't necessarily know that I'm an Arab and I sound like this. So I spent a lot of time sort of desperately assimilating and hiding in plain sight and trying to just be invisible, actually. And it was only in my early 20s when I met the man who would become my husband that he very gently was encouraging me to kind of, what about this seminar? And, oh, look, this looks like an interesting conference. And I bought you this book. And because my dad never really talked to me about politics, I've been to Palestine, and I still have family there, but my dad never really, he never really talked about it too much to me. And I think part of the reason I was challenged about this once when I was speaking at a Arab women kind of conference event, because my Arabic isn't great either. I can read and write it perfectly, but my spoken Arabic isn't very good. And so somebody challenged me and said, you know, why didn't your father teach you? And, you know, sometimes when you're talking an idea, you understand something, you know, a thought crystallizes in discussion. And this is what happened. And I realized as I spoke, I said, you know, I think it's because he wanted to make me as English as possible, because he didn't think that being an Arab, certainly a Palestinian, would be any advantage to me in my life. So he was giving me some kind of a gift, you know. So I guess, yeah, to your question, I think it was relayering. So kind of, the thing that I always held on to was the food. Like, my dad's a great lover of food, and I learned how to cook Palestinian dishes. But, you know, in terms of educating myself, not only about my country's history, but also about the literature and the art, and creating a community of artists around me who are other artists from the diaspora and the Middle East, and that's been really that's really fed me and has been really important in sort of bringing me to where I am as a writer, I think. And in terms of the women in Hakawatis, it's always been from the beginning for me about trying to see women on stage who I recognise, so often Arab women are portrayed in such reductive ways. And so to have women who are not exoticized or demeaned in any way, but who are complex and problematic and funny and loud and sexual, that's what I recognize. And so I just always want to put that into the world, to try and be like, actually these are the women I know and love. So yeah, that was a big part of it, was about that for sure.
And I'm curious because the show resonated so much with me. I'm not an Arab woman. I'm coming from close to that part of the world, but I'm wondering if you had them, what were the comments or the impressions of white women or women who did not have that experience, who maybe could not resonate with the show? Or was every woman somehow recognizing herself, at least even to a little extent, in the show? So because to me it was, because I watched it, I told you, like 3 times and every time I cried, and every time it really touched like every cell of my body, and I was wondering, why is this having such a big impact on me? I'm not an Arab woman, and yet I'm curious, what were the impressions?
Well, I mean, I didn't have many people come and I didn't have anyone tell me that they had a problem with it, but that might just be because people were nice, or they I don't know, but most people who saw it seemed to really sort of enjoy it and connect with it. But for me, it's not about, in the script it doesn't say this character is from Morocco, this character is from Egypt. It doesn't do that. It's extremely open, so that the actors can take a responsibility and do that. But also, always the point is, even though, I'm being specific in showing you this Arab woman, the point is we're all more the same than we are different. That's it, isn't it? And that's also, that's how you break down barriers between people and try and get past division. It's like, ultimately, we're all human beings. We all bleed. We all cry, we all go to the toilet, we all laugh, hopefully. So, and I think particularly laughter is such an important and incredibly powerful tool in theatre. If you sit, and that's why I love theatre, because the act of sitting in a room with 100, 200, 300 people who you've never met before, and this, there's this idea that when you sit in the theatre together, everyone's heart starts beating in the same rhythm. It's an act of community in a world where there are fewer and fewer moments that bring us together in a harmonious way. And so what a privilege to be someone who's making something that can bring people together in that way, and responsibility. But I think laughter is a really important tool. So when I'm sat there and I'm listening to all these people laughing, it's really an amazing feeling. There's a bit of dissonance goes on, because I'm sort of a bit like, I laugh and then I'm like, oh, I wrote that, why am I laughing at it? But then I realized, no, I'm not laughing at myself, I'm laughing at the brilliant actors who are making the words better than they are. But there's something really powerful and important, I think, about bringing a group of people together, and that's how, hopefully, I really do believe, it sounds really silly, but I really do believe theatre can change the world. And I think that's why, because it can bring people together in a way that other art forms just can't.
It's interesting, as you were, I didn't have that in my awareness, but as you were just speaking, this did remind me. So Serbia was bombed in 1999, and actually what kept the hope for us was a lot of humor. That's what I remember from the time. And sitting in that dungeon was partly a reminder of the times where you were kind of in front of the predator and kind of telling each other stories of how we might just make it, and then telling all these stories. And I think there are so many small things I wrote for myself as I was watching at the show. So one of them is let's keep the magic. It's our only hope. And to me, that is really how my everyday is hopefully trying to look like.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, how do you bring magic to your days?
How do I bring magic to I don't have to bring magic to my days. I've got my daughter Luna. She brings the magic to my day. Like, I wake up and there are these big green eyes always smiling at me or asking me the most bizarre questions. She's here now looking at me, asking me the most bizarre questions first thing in the morning as soon as I wake up. So that's my magic. And also by, I think, just being interested and curious in the world around us, nature. And I'm very privileged to live in a place where I have a garden and there's birds and foxes and also other literature and other people, other human beings. I think is magic. Their magic, and that kind of that's what excites me, and also nice food. I like to eat and I like to bake. Anyone who looks at my Instagram will know that I am food crazy. I'm constantly baking and cooking and enjoying food. So yeah, these are the pleasures, I think.
Yeah, I was looking actually at the Daughter's Lab behind you, and it really impacted me. Yeah. And when you were writing the show, because that's actually the privilege of having a living writer and being able to talk about it, is how does the creative process look like? Where did the idea start? How did these incredible replicas come to be? Was that in the beginning, or only at the end you realized, oh, this really works well? So how was the process?
It's funny, it's always different for every single play, but for this one, it was really, really inspired, I think, by that space, by the Sam Wanamaker, that theatre at the Globe, which is so beautiful in the Jacobean style with the candles. I had never seen anything there, and then I went to see a show called Lions and Tigers by Tanika Gupta, which was directed by Pooja Ghai, who also directed Hakawatis. And I just fell in. The show was great, and I fell in love with the space. And I, thought, if I was privileged enough to write something for this space, what would I write? And as I walked home, I was thinking about lots of different, I think, all the little trickling things in my head. And I had recently, I want to say recently, like in the last few years previous to that, I had seen a couple of iterations of 1001 Nights. And something just sort of clicked, and I had this idea, about Sherazade. What if she's not a brilliant storyteller? All the other women will be, wanting to help her because they'll be helping themselves. And so I had the idea. I said, it's such a shame that I don't know the artistic director of the theatre. I'd love to be able to pitch that to her. And then I thought, come on, you can send an email. So I sent Michelle Terry, the artistic director of the Globe, an email saying, you don't know me, I think you're brilliant. I have an idea. I don't suppose you've got time for a cup of tea. And so we had a cup of tea, and I told her the idea, and she really loved it, and she commissioned me. And it was really a very significant moment for me, because it was the first time I had shows in lots of places by that point, but it was the first time that I said to someone, I have this idea, and they said, yeah, I like it, have some money, go and write it. Normally I would just write it, and then so that was really powerful, that act of trust and belief that someone else had in me. And
sorry to interrupt you, and I imagine that is also a great support as you're writing, and kind of allowing you to go places you might not have gone if you didn't know you had that support.
Yes, but also conversely, it also is a lot of responsibility.
Yes,
because I do a weird kind of psychological trick when I'm writing plays. I think to myself, it might sound counterproductive, but I think to myself, this will never be produced. No one will ever see this play. It's only for me. And therefore, it sort of allows me to not worry about, oh God, what will so-and-so say about this? Or will so-and-so recognize themselves? Or, it allows me just to be quite free in the writing of it. Then I worry about all that stuff after I get into that. So yeah, it was just, but it was amazing to have that trust from her. And so I went away, and I write my first drafts fairly quickly when I'm ready. When they're cooked, then they come out quickly. And so I think I went away for about a week, and I stayed by the seaside, and I just wrote it, and it just came out really fast. And it wasn't complicated. But of course, as part of the idea, I had asked, please could I have 4 other Arab women writers. Did we have 4? Suhaila, we had Hanan, and Sarah. No, I had 3 other Arab women writers to write stories for the show. So I had pitched them to them, please could you all write a new story for me? And they all said yes, of course. So that was the slightly tricky bit. It was sort of like, I have to leave spaces for their stories and be ready then when they send them to try and knit them in and make sure that they work in terms of, in terms of what the overall arch of the story of the play is going to be. But it was like it was meant to be, because when they did send their stories, it's like, oh yeah, this one's perfect, this one can go here, and that'll be so-and-so story and so there. But in terms of like the sitting and writing of it, it was just joyous, particularly the beginning. It was really amazing, because the beginning of the play is sort of like an orgasm. And I sat and I was really aware that that's what I wanted it to be. And I was by the sea, which is obviously, an amazingly kind of amazing force and very powerful. And I was, it just sort of came out really, really easily, the beginning of the play. And once it's that starting, it's always the most important bit, I think, for me anyway. Getting into the flow. So it wasn't tricky to write. And I think all of those women, rather than being people who I know or anything like that, they're all different facets of Sherazade, I guess, and maybe all different facets of me, how all the different masks that we wear, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the orgasm part, that was also something that was really interesting to me. It's almost like orgasmic way of living, and that again, connectedness to life, and being able to really experience it with your whole body. And I think that's what the show was for me, regardless of their circumstances. Somehow they were connected to life and had a very strong orgasmic connection with it. And actually, what you said, one thing, weave into stories, and I have here weaving yarns that enchant and delight him, and that is really like the juice of the storyteller. And I'm wondering, what's your visual of a storyteller? What is it that how does it happen for you?
How do you
weave?
How do you weave? Yeah, I mean, it is amazing, isn't it, that you can give 5 different people the same story? I mean, that would be a really interesting thing, actually, to give 5 different writers the same story and ask them to just write it, and you see how differently because what I observe in my own writing, and I then therefore presume in others, is that you cannot leave your own self, your own life out of it. It's filled with kind of, which is what, and that's what makes it good, because it's those kind of observances and kind of the heart stuff, the stuff of life and the detail of life that I think is what makes things really interesting and exciting. There's a line that Zuya says after she tells the story about the sparrow who has got above himself, and we discover that it's a story that her mother used to tell her, and Fatah says to her, "Mother told you that story?" Sort of like, why would she tell you that story? And she says, to stop me going to school. And Fatah's really shocked, and she said, why would she do that? And she said, because I remember because I reminded her of my father. And I've had so many people, that line, there's a couple of lines, but that line is one that really, really, like, people have really kind of, I think it really got them, because it's sort of, you know, that kind of a hard, real truth in a play that's full of fictional stories is really kind of, it hits hard, maybe.
And interesting. I was thinking, oh, what is my moment? And then I felt the moment. Can we have a moment? And when that came to be, where words.
That's beautiful. That's in Sarah Sharawi's story. It's absolutely beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, she's an amazing storyteller, and so to be able to go from the pure kind of knockabout comedy and kind of really bawdy hammam, and then to end with this really beautiful, like, thing that's about kind of, you know, that's about humanness.
Yes.
About a genie wanting to actually have a sense of what it is to be human, and knowing that humans have moments where they connect with one another, and the power of that as well. I mean, just generally in the world, but the power of that post-COVID, you know, where I wrote this play, it was to go on during 2020. So it obviously went on hold, and I was in limbo with it for quite a long time, just not knowing if it would ever happen, you know. And so I am so delighted that it has happened. And but that also gets me at the moment, because I'm like, again, it's one of those things that feels like it's sort of, you could think it's really knowing about COVID and about kind of the fact that we had so much time not together. But she wrote it before the pandemic, so it's like something really universal and beautiful.
And again, how we can strip all the words and still be able to connect.
Exactly. Yeah,
I think
absolutely. And the power of song, and then you've got an amazing singer like Laura Hannah, who you know played Zia in the play, and then she sings, and everyone cries. So it's really good.
Yeah. And I'm also wondering about the story within stories, and I don't know if I wrote this or it was somewhere in the show, but like a room of mirrors, never-ending illusion. I don't know who wrote this.
I think that's you. Very poetic. It's sort of, there's something really wonderful and sort of that I find quite safe about that. You know, I went to the Infinity Rooms at the Tate yesterday with my family, and the idea that you can just fall into a story, and it's definitely, you know, there's something about it feeling safe, you know, and it's like what Akila said at the end of the play, about I'm in control. You know, for one moment, I'm going to paraphrase my own work, but you know, for one moment the chaos stops and I'm in control, and there's something really, really powerful about that. And definitely for me, storytelling has been a very safe place. You know, after my daughter was born, I had some mental health issues, and I really, really, I can fall into the play and feel, and the work, and be writing and feel safe. And that's really, even if I'm writing about things that aren't safe, because I'm in control, there's something really powerful and helpful and healing about it for me.
Actually, very interestingly, I would have mentioned mental health as my next question, because well, I'm studying psychotherapy, but what inspired me to ask this was really the idea that after a trauma or any sort of difficult periods in our life, there is something about being able to rewrite our stories and to be creators of our stories, and to own that right, and to remind ourselves that we are creators. We can direct some of our lives, if not all. And I guess my question is, When did you allow that power to yourself? Because that is the kind of power I wish more people would get in touch with.
Yeah, I think from very early on, from even the first play, I mean, you know, I think I definitely think that, you know, winning that prize with the first play made me feel confident about my writing. And then after that, all the things that I wrote, there was a lot of kind of rejection. I guess winning the prize initially helped me think, you know, I can do this. But also, even if, like I say, even if I wasn't in a position now to be doing it full time or whatever, I would still be doing it because I'm compelled to do it, because I have to do it, because it is really healing. And I think it's about confidence, but it's also about sort of the weight of expectation, you know, like thinking, if I'm writing something, you know, this is why I do this sort of little cognitive dissonance and say no one's ever going to read it, because you start thinking, oh my goodness me, you know, this is going to be on stage somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, you know. So it's really, it becomes too much. It becomes too difficult. And I mean, sometimes, so another play that I had at the Globe, The Fir Tree, for the first time in my life, tickets went on sale for a show that I hadn't written yet. I wouldn't recommend that. I found it very stressful. It's quite hard to do that little sort of cognitive dissonance that no one's ever going to see it, because it's like, oh no, but people are actually paying money now. So that's quite tricky. But I think it's just about allowing yourself the space to do it, and then also knowing that only the people who you want to see it will see it. It can only be for you if it's necessary, you know. You don't have to show it to other people, but that it feels, it's a very empowering act, like you say, definitely. And that's really important.
Interesting. We had a workshop which was on freeform writing, and the first part of the workshop we could decide whether actually all the workshop we could decide if we ever want to share our work, but the feedback could only be thank you.
Good.
And I think that was really interesting to experience, to know that you won't have critical feedback, at least for the beginning of.
It's really important.
Yeah, of your writing. And one thing I wanted to ask, which was, I'm reading this sentence: "Desire is not deceitful," and I think the whole show is sexual and not sexual at the same time, which is why I really like it, because somehow we are sexualizing things that are not necessarily connected only with pure sexuality. And even the orgasm, you know, you can take it very literally, and you can take it very metaphorically as a way of living. So I'm curious, desire is not deceitful. How did that come to be?
So that's a line from Hanan al-Sheikh's story, and she is another masterful storyteller. I'm very privileged that she wrote one of the sort of smaller pieces inside the play, because she's been a huge influence on me. She's a Lebanese novelist, and she's always written really brave pieces about women and their sexuality. But there's something about the difference between the male gaze and sexuality and the female gaze and sexuality. And the thing is, we are so used to the male version of female sexuality. It's all we get, actually. So even when women are writing, because we are so barraged with the male view of what sex is, it's sort of really limiting, I think. And I think the whole play is written structurally like a female orgasm, whereas most plays in the Western structure are, you know, they come up to a peak and then they go down. So, you know, you have the moment of climax, you build climax, and then, I mean, that's literally Aristotelian playwriting structure, it's a male orgasm. Whereas this is, you know, it's cyclical, it's like waves, it's circular, it, you know, it goes backwards and forwards, it has a different kind of drive. And I just think a lot of people aren't, I think we're not used to really thinking about that, you know, because we're so conditioned to just see it from the masculine point of view. Whereas I think, you know, the female orgasm and the female kind of whole like way of being and moving through the world can be different, is different. We just don't get to see it that often. And so, yeah, I'm really proud of this play for that as well, because I feel like it sort of offers a very different perspective. And in terms of, you know, so interesting, you know, when we read through the play initially, I got nervous at points like, oh God, is it too long? Are the stories too long? Do we need to drive forward more? No, again, that's a very male thing. It's also a very Western thing. Like, you know, we sit with the story. We're all going to go through this together. We're all going to sit with the story and enjoy the stories together. And that's part of the experience of the play. It's not about getting to the end, finding out who did it. You know, it's not like, will she come back? You know, will they get killed? That's not what the play's about. The play's about them sitting in their hope and in their sisterhood and in their desire and longing to be something else than they are and uplifting each other. That's what it's about.
That's very the word is gestalty, because that's the word that's the psychotherapy I'm studying, but actually the podcast is called Being and Doing, and I think that is part of that. It's sitting with, and here I have the sentence, sitting with the afterglow of the story, because it does take, so in Gestalt we have this cycle of experience where you kind of you sense that something is happening for you, you go to you recognize what that need is, you go to satisfy it, but then there is withdrawal and there is fertile void and there is sitting with what just happened. And I feel like we so much skip that to the next thing and to the next thing and to the next thing.
Of course, because it's all about move. We're always in a hurry to move forward, and I'm very guilty of that. You know, like the next thing, but actually to sit and be with, and just to observe and listen and understand. These are skills that certainly in the West we're not so good at, actually.
And an interesting thing around that. Female sexuality and being seen through the male lens. Although the male lens, I must say, I'm not sure how male it is and how much is something else. But there was an interesting thing as you were speaking, is as if we are invited to just play a role in a movie that wasn't written by us, and we kind of adopt that role, but we don't really recognize.
I think that's it.
And then one of my therapists said, always be careful to see which movie you're recruited for.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And say no.
And say no. Exactly. And there is one thing here which I really liked as well, is pretend we are already dead. Why they like that? But why do they like that? And that kind of cut me as a knife, and because there is something about deadness and inflicting pain, and that being somehow embedded in culture. And I think in some parts I have started reading a book, The Dutiful Boy, which it's about a Muslim family, and it starts with really, really difficult scenes of how the faith has embedded pain in it. Really, I don't want to describe the scene because it's quite difficult, but there is something about that still being in our cultures, I know in Serbia there is a lot of deadness that we kind of perpetuate to each other. And so I wonder what did you have, or I don't know who wrote the sentence, but
That's me. That's me. Yeah, that's very much me. That one. I think it's about trying to understand or think about the fact that, you know, there's different ways to try and control the world around us. And I think controlling it through writing and through telling stories is a really healthy way of doing that. But trying to control someone else by hurting them, by having power over them, you know, it's not good, but it's something that I observe, and it's, you know, think about it a lot, about kind of why, you know, people, I don't want to say men because it's not solely men, but it's largely men, hurt other people, and, you know, physically, and trying to sort of what compels people to do that, you know. And I think it is about frustration and feeling a lack of power and wanting to control, and something about wanting to get, like, that there's something intimidating about the power of women and about what we are capable of. And I mean that sort of literally and metaphorically. You know, the fact that a woman's body produces a child is kind of huge and astonishing, and there's such power in that, and maybe that's intimidating, I don't know, but yeah, it's something that troubles me a lot, and I'm interested in where that impulse comes from, and trying to I'm always, you know, it's the things that make me want to write are the things that I don't understand or that make me angry or upset. And what I want to do when I write is to ask those questions, explore those ideas, never answer them ever, because that's not my job. And I feel like that's for the audience then to take away and sit with and think about. But yeah, that's a preoccupation for sure.
And I think when we're talking about power, there's the sentence, "You erase my story, you erase me," and I think your play really is again empowering in that sense, that you bring stories that may have been erased, and I think it's related to this previous question about really erasure of people's right to their stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're in a really sort of hot moment now, certainly I think in theatre, where there is a lot of redressing that, I think, and people being given the space to tell. Well, I mean, for goodness sake, Hakawatis on the stage at the Globe. I mean, that in itself tells you something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That there's a growing willingness to embrace and open the door to other people's stories that have hitherto not had that platform. The problem is, it's about making sure that it's absolutely the story that person wants to tell, and not what they think that people want to hear. Do you see what I mean? Like, or that it's not sort of feeding some kind of a different narrative or somebody else's agenda. Yeah. So it's a fine line to walk, but I feel like actually we're in a fairly good place certainly in terms of there's some brilliant work being made by writers who may not have been given the space or the platform to put their work, 5-10 years ago.
And so being mindful of time, the last question I have is about storytellers being gatherers of meaning. And so what was the meaning for you to tell the story of Hakawatis?
What was the meaning for me? I think it's what happens on stage is a communal act, and what happens in the audience is a communal act. And I love writing. I love writing for television. I love writing for radio. I love writing films. But theatre is where my heart lives and where it will always be, because it's such a special live medium. And I think I'm always sort of interrogating, like, why is this a play? Why is this a play? What is it about this that means that it couldn't be just put a camera in front of it and it becomes a television show? And so it's particularly in that space as well, the Sam Wanamaker, where there is no distance between the actors and the audience. We're all in it together. And there's a sort of line in the script that you probably won't have seen because it's a stage direction, where there's a moment where the women look into the audience and they see everybody there as the women who have gone before them, the sort of spirits of the women who have gone before them. And so this idea of it being a collective act, an empowering act, the idea that stories can change the world and you have the power to do that. You've got to do it.
I just got goosebumps as you were saying this. I bought immediately the script. So
We'll have a look at the stage directions.
I will. And because that was exactly what I experienced. That was exactly my experience. And that was also something I was thinking, is the stories of all the women that have gone before me, for me to be able to be here.
Exactly.
And I think my voice is tremoring as I'm saying that. So I wanted to see if there was a question I didn't ask, but you really have a burning desire to answer.
I don't think so. I thank you for all your questions. They've been so thoughtful, and I'm really, I'm just really touched that you saw it 3 times and that it obviously meant a lot to you. That's, I always feel like if you can just touch one person, then the job is done. So that's really amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the Gestalt therapists, she says therapy is a political act, but I think storytelling is a political act.
100%. Yeah, I get very frustrated when writers say I'm not a political writer, because as far as I'm concerned, as soon as you put a pen to a page, start typing something, it's political. We're political beings. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And one question that I like to ask, which is not related to the storytelling, but it's, what is an absurd thing about you that not many people know about?
Absurd thing about me? There's lots of absurd things about me. I think most of my absurd things are, I think most people would be quite surprised because I come across as sort of measured and calm, but I'm riddled with anxiety. And so if I have to get a train, I leave extremely early, and my poor husband's like, we're not going yet. And I'm like, yes, we are. We need to. He's like, we don't need to be waiting on the platform or at the airport for an hour. I'm like, yes, we do. So that's kind of absurd, I guess. And also that, even though I love stories and I love writing, in bed I like to do a Sudoku before I go to sleep. I like numbers before I go to sleep.
Yeah. So thank you so much. I really want to thank you for your voice, for your stories, and for what you created for me and hopefully for many others.
Thank you.
You've just heard the story of Hannah Khalil, a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature and the 2022 resident writer at the Shakespeare's Globe. Her work includes Hakawatis, Women of the Arabian Nights, Henry VIII, and The Fear. Hannah's other stage play include A Museum in Baghdad, which marked the first play by a woman of Arab heritage on the main stage of the RSC. Hannah has written radio plays for BBC Radio 4, and her TV work includes multiple episodes of the Channel 4 drama Hollyoaks. She held the Heimbold Chair of Irish Studies at Villanova University and the Samuel Beckett Creative Fellowship. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and please share, like, and subscribe so that these stories can reach more people.